In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Good evening. We're so glad that all of you viewers can join us this evening, and those that are listening to the podcast later, thank you so much for being with us. And I really want to thank these ladies for bailing us out tonight. Cindy had some dental work done, and the lesson she had planned to talk about tonight, the joy of compassion, we're going to do in a couple of weeks. But tonight we're going to talk about compassion. And then we're going to look at some Bible examples of compassion. So I wanted to thank Jill and Judy and Nikki for being with us tonight to talk about that. Thank y'all so much. Such a joy to be with you again.
Thank you, Isla.
Jill, I want to get you to unmute yourself and to be ready to, if you will, to give us a definition of compassion and what we're going to be talking about tonight.
So it's important for us to really have an understanding what it is we're trying to look for in these Bible characters. We think about sympathy and empathy, and what's the difference between those? Those are both being able to identify with someone else's feelings as though you're feeling it yourself. But compassion has another component to it that I found when I looked it up. It's sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings of others with the desire to help alleviate that pain and that suffering. So it's an active empathy, if you will, so that someone is doing something to help because they feel their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's interesting. It has that component of action, not just a feeling. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Judy,
right.
Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah. So agree with everything that was just said. And I thought about, like, we feel bad for someone who is going, through tough times, and we want to help them. And perhaps something like we try to walk in their shoes, kind of, so to speak. Like we look at them and we think, what would I feel like if that were me? What would I need? What would I feel like? So, yeah, we definitely have that compassion to suffer kind of together with them. Yeah.
Nikki, any thoughts to add on this beginning ideas here, about compassion?
Yes, thank you, Isla. Jill, that was a really, really good definition. And I'm so glad that you shared compared empathy to compassion, but also showed the difference, because there is a difference. I consider myself an empathetic person. Like, I feel everything that people are going through. I just feel it as if it's happening to me. But when you put compassion or being a compassionate person in there, I'm thinking of, like what you said, Isla, action. Like you want to alleviate whatever that is that person is dealing with. You want to fix it. And sometimes you can fix it and sometimes you can't. But that's a really important component of that, is there's a next level to being empathetic. Showing compassion is you actually want to do something about it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. We want to talk about some examples then of those who showed compassion. Judy, you want to start us out with the woman that you had in mind to talk about tonight?
Sure. So I would like to talk about the Shunammite woman. And I think she fits in perfectly with what we all have just been saying, action. She definitely showed action. Her compassion brought her to that. So Elisha, who was a prophet, used to, come to her town, or he was going through her town on his way to Mount Carmel, I believe. And she would, invite him in to eat because he needed to eat. And so I think that kind of happened on several occasions until finally she says to her husband, well, why don't we just build a nice room for him, or build a room for him? And it could have a desk, or not a desk, a table, I think, and a bed and a lampstand, So she was like thinking about how she could help him, so that he could stop there and he could eat and he could also retire. And it wasn't just for him, as we know, as the story, we read it, the account, that it was also his servant was involved in that also. So, based on what we've been talking about, she saw that there was a need there, and she jumped right to it. Basically, she had her emotions, if you will, to some degree, but mostly because she saw a need, and so she wanted to respond to that. And what a wonderful way to respond! And of course, her and her husband built the room. She asks him, she says, what do you think about this? Basically, I'm paraphrasing, of course. And by the way, we find this account in 2 Kings 4, verses 8 through 37. So I thought about this, and I thought about, well, how about today? How would we maybe put this lesson in for us? Is there a way? The way she was, how she served this man. And we know that, the account goes on much further, where he helps her and she bores a child and the child gets sick. And okay, but right now we're basically talking about her and her compassion for Elisha, the prophet. So, what I think about is use what you have to be a blessing to others. Because I believe that the woman, because she had servants, and so she had she wasn't poor, let's say. So I don't think maybe she was that rich, but she wasn't poor, and she was able to use what she had to help him to do this, so that he had a place to stay every time he passed through. So the lesson, for me, for today would be, we could relate to maybe visiting preachers and their families. Maybe they come to give a lesson at our congregation. They're going to stay for a few days. We could invite them to stay at our place if we can, or we could put them up in a hotel. There's ways of showing compassion. Here's a preacher who's coming through and perhaps needs a place to stay. He does need a place to stay. So we could show our compassion in that way. There's many ways. I thought about neighbors. We could show compassion to our neighbors, various ways. Okay. Like, say, if something would happen to their house, if a fire or anything, a flood, whatever, any kind of catastrophe, of course, we could definitely say, if we had the room, bring them in. Again, if not, we don't have the room, or we can put them up in a hotel, perhaps, and pay for that. Kind of like the man on the road and he stopped by and helped him. So those are things that I came up with. Of course, I thought of foster children, and I thought of adoption. Those are other ways. Those are all ways in which we could show our compassion to those who are in need of that. And I think the Shunammite woman is a great example of that. It doesn't appear she had any secondary thoughts or anything of that nature, but that she just wanted to help him. She wanted to bless him, in a sense, by giving him a room and a place to stay and food to eat.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just glancing over the scriptures with that, and I thought it was amazing that this compassion that she had for him was just a small thing, but it was something she could act on. But it seems to have grown into a relationship
Mhm.
over time. The
Yeah.
compassion she had for his situation, and then the compassion he had for her in return. Um,
Mhm.
so these kinds of things can grow into something bigger. It doesn't have to be what you would consider a major charitable act.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree.
Yeah.
That's
yeah, I think that
excellent.
was interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, I liked reading about her. Um,
Mhm.
it really, it kind of hit home in some ways. Yeah, it was good.
Mhm. Nikki, any thoughts on this one?
Too many, but I'm just going to pick one.
Okay.
Well, really, because just like Judy said, there's so much in there. There's so much in there.
Yeah.
Um, one thing that you did say, Judy, is that there was like no question. She just went into action. Like she just did it. It's almost
Yeah.
as if, okay, I see a need, and she went to her husband. Okay, I need this. Can we please do this? So you just do it. you do it. Trust God to handle the rest. And
Mm.
I can think of examples of where I've done that. My husband has done that, and we just jump into action, and then we kind of think about it later, like it's okay. Yeah, we'll figure it out, and it worked out. And like you said, this what Jill said, this relationship was built after that.
Mhm.
You don't know what could happen
Mhm.
after you show that kind of compassion to someone. You have no idea how that will be reciprocated. Not that you're doing it to be
Right.
reciprocated, but you just don't know where the blessing could be on the other side. And so why would I not want that to happen? Why would I not want to feel that? So yes, the Shunammite woman is one of my favorite stories. And I just love how she says this multiple times. I don't know how many times, but she says, "It is well." She's like,
Yeah.
"It is well." Like, in other words, it's
It's
okay.
okay. It's okay.
It'll
Okay,
all
we got it.
it is well.
I,
It's okay.
I like the part where when Elisha says, what can we do for you? What can I do for
Mhm.
you? Is there something? And she says, I dwell among my own people.
My
And it was just like,
Mhm.
I'm good. You know,
Yeah.
she obviously was not doing this thinking, well, this is a prophet. And he goes back and forth to the king. Maybe, she just had, like we talked about earlier, she had that empathy for this man who was walking from place to place, ministering to the people.
Right.
And here was something she could do.
Yeah.
She had that empathy and she acted on it as well. Early on by feeding him, and then by making that place that he hadn't asked for, but she, as you said, she saw the need and just stepped up to do it. And a wonderful example, I think, for us of compassion.
Yes.
Um, Nikki, do you have an example you'd like to present for us?
I do. This was hard. You said one woman and one man, and I'm like, um,
Too many, too many.
right. But that's a good problem to have, right? Because we have
Right.
God's word, and we have many examples. We have no excuse not to know how to show compassion. So
Mhm.
one of the ones that I chose, and this scripture reference is Luke chapter 7, verses 36 through 50. And let me get there really quickly. Sorry, should be. So this example is what's known as the sinful woman, right? The sinful woman that Jesus forgives. We're not told her name. Just giving a little context to this story, we're not told her name. It just says that she was a sinner, which I find so interesting. Excuse me, but I want to tap into that a little bit later. It says that she's a sinner. And so here we are again. Jesus is being invited into a Pharisee's home, right? Oh, yay, to be invited into a Pharisee's home. They always have an agenda. There's an agenda there every single time, and Jesus knows it. But I love Jesus because he goes anyway.
Yeah.
He goes anyway, and he sits down to eat this meal. It doesn't say who else is there. I'm sure there's other people there, but Simon is actually, Simon the Pharisees. This is his home. And Jesus sits down. And this woman finds out that he's there, sees that he's there, and she comes to him. I find it interesting that one, she just walks in the house. Like, I don't know what this house looks like, right? But she knows that Jesus is there, and she goes in to Simon's home. And the very first thing she does is, and I have to read this part because this part is so powerful to me. Luke chapter 7, verse 37 says, "And behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of fragrant oil and stood at his feet behind him, weeping." So number one, this is a sinner, right? A woman who is a sinner. She knows Jesus is there. She goes straight in there without even conversating or asking any questions, falls to his feet. But you see where she is? She's behind him. She's behind him, kneels at his feet, and starts. I try to picture this. Like, okay, she starts wiping his feet with her tears. But was she like bawling? How many tears? Like, I can imagine how much water is actually coming out for her to be able to wipe his feet off. Right. But she is just pouring her heart out in tears, wiping his feet with her tears. And not only does she do that, she takes her hair. Can you imagine taking y'all's hair and just wiping his feet, dusting his feet off with her hair? She goes on. Okay, here's this. Verse 38. Is it? Yes. She kissed his feet, wipes his feet with the tears and hair on her head. Then she kisses his feet and then puts this most expensive oil on his feet. She doesn't live there. She's showing hospitality, and I just want to throw that out there. She don't live there. But she's doing what would be customary for the host to do. She's doing that. Verse 39. Now, when the Pharisee I'm getting ahead of myself. Verse 39. Now, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he spoke within himself. And we know this part always makes me chuckle because he's talking to himself. Not only does he say, he's talking within himself, and then he says, I'm paraphrasing, if he only knew not only who, but what manner of woman this was who was touching him. So my first thought is, really? How do you know what kind of a woman she is? I could be reading into that, but you know where I'm going with that. Like, obviously she is known in the city for whatever it is, but he knew who she was. And he knew what manner of woman she was. But y'all, she didn't care about that. The one at this very moment, what she cared about was showing Jesus hospitality and it wasn't even her house. It wasn't even her house. The way she showed compassion on him or to him, cleaning his feet, kissing his feet, anointing his feet with the most expensive oil, that even the Pharisee who invited Jesus into his home, did not do, which is, a telltale sign that he didn't invite you in because he really wanted to serve you, Jesus. No, he had intention. He had intention there. So they go into this story, but further down, verse 44, they go back and forth. Verse 44, this is Jesus. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon. So now Jesus is actually looking at her while he's talking to Simon. So think of Jesus, turns away from the table, and Isla, he's looking you straight in the eye. He's talking to Simon, but he's looking at you. And he says, do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she washed my feet with her tears, and she wiped them with the hair that is on her head. You gave me no kiss, not even a customary kiss. Thank you for coming into my home, Jesus. Have a seat. What would you like to eat? Nothing. You gave me no kiss, but this woman hasn't ceased to kiss my feet since I came in. You did not anoint my head with oil, but this woman has anointed my feet with fragrant oil, expensive oil. Therefore, I say to you, her sins, which I find so interesting, he says, which are many. He makes a point to say, look, I'm not looking past her sins because she's got a lot of them. She's got a lot of them, but they're forgiven. She loved much. She loved much. Y'all, it doesn't have to be Jesus coming into our home for us to show that kind of love and compassion for people. We're not talking about wiping people's feet when they come in and things like that. We're living in a different time. But inviting someone over, when there's visitors who come to the assembly, you introduce yourselves. How hard would it be to say, hey, you know what? We were getting ready to go out to eat. Y'all want to come join us? That can be showing compassion. Inviting someone over, even if it's just for tea. Hey, you know what? I really want to get to know you a little bit better. Why don't you come on over? Even if it could be your neighbor next door. Your neighbor just had a baby and her husband is away in the army. Been there, done that. It's the experience of it. And that's hard. I can't even imagine. But hey, going over, how can I help you? Can I help clean your house? Can I cook you a meal? Something like that. This story here just tears me to pieces. And I know I'm talking so much, but I just want to open it up. It tears me to pieces when I think about this woman because she did not think about herself at all. So even if you take Jesus out of this, take yourself out of it. How would Jesus want me to respond to this person? How can I help this person? And if there's a way I can help them, I need to go out of my way to do it because that's what she did. She went out of her way.
Right.
That kind of compassion to Jesus.
Yes.
So what do y'all think about this story?
It is a powerful story. And it really shows her initiative to come to Jesus, what was in her heart to do for him. And knowing that, you didn't have to be around Jesus much in terms of the Pharisees to know what a hard time they were giving him and how difficult it was.
Yes.
And then for her to come and to do this honor for him it really is. It's very moving, very touching. Jill, you have any thoughts on this one? Oh, I'm sorry, Judy.
Oh, that's all right. Go ahead, Jill.
Well, I see the compassion the woman has for, I don't know if that fits our definition we talked about tonight for compassion. It was certainly a great act that she performed and necessary, But even stronger is the compassion that Christ had for her,
Yes.
where the Pharisee had none. um,
Mm.
she knew what a situation was in, and anyone who's been caught in bad sin, when I'll tell you, once you lose your innocence, it's not something you can get back.
No.
And the feeling that she must have had as she recognized her sin before him, and yet she knows he has that power to forgive,
Yes.
and he does. His compassion is so great, and that's something we see all through the scriptures. How great is God's compassion and Christ, his son, for our situation, because we're all in some kind of sin.
Yes.
Right.
And we need to think about that with each other.
Yes.
That's my point I want to make. When someone comes forward and wants to leave that sin,
Yes.
some people do want to live in sin, but some don't.
No.
And
Right.
we need to help those people feel that compassion toward them when they want to leave that style of life.
Amen.
Yep. Agreed.
Sorry, Judy.
That's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to say, like in verse 47, where Jesus, he sums it up. She loved much.
Mm-hmm.
Love is an action.
Yes.
Love is an action. And she certainly did that. So love, he says she loved much, and she did. She loved Jesus. She loved much, and she showed it by her action, because again, love is an action. A lot of people say, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Yeah. Do you?
Yes.
Do you really? Yeah.
Or it's easy to have compassion verbally. Oh, I really feel for you. I know you're going through a hard time. You let me know if there's anything I can do, or I'm and not to minimize prayer. Of course, that's the most important thing we can do for anybody. But sometimes there are other things to relieve physical needs that we fail to do because we do that. I think of, what is the scripture that says, "Be ye warmed and filled." Good luck to you, kind of thing. And we have to do more that we're physically able to. But if we're not physically able to, we need to relieve. We need to show our compassion at the very least by praying for one another. But she is a wonderful example of coming to Jesus, wanting to do what's right, and to do what was good for him. I think, what I think of too is the woman, I think it was Mary in John 12, that took a pound of the expensive ointment and anointed Jesus's feet, and then wiped his feet with her hair. At the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. John calls her Mary. And I've often thought about that when one time teaching that, it never occurred to me, and I read it in a commentary, that this was soon, when close to his crucifixion, he may have still smelled that fragrance when he died, on the cross. I'm just like, and because it sticks with you. I thought that was so powerful that, and he said, that she's anointed me for my burial. And the compassion that she felt, knowing because she'd been listening to Jesus teach, and knowing what he was going through and what he was feeling, and then to do this act of compassion. Those two remind me of one another. Those two circumstances remind me of one another.
That's good.
Let's see. Jill, did you have a woman that you wanted to present to us, a different example of compassion?
Well, we had talked, there's so many. We see Tabitha or Dorcas in Acts 9. Flip over there. And in the passage, she's passed away, and she lived at Joppa. She's described as full of good works and charitable deeds, which she did. And at her death, the people who were there, her friends, the disciples, weeping and showing the tunics and garments which Dorcas had made while she was with them. It seems like she was the kind of person who always had other people on their mind, kind of like Nikki was talking about, just always ready to do something. And the something that she apparently was good at doing was providing clothing for people. So we know that a lot of times in the early church, people were displaced from their homes and sometimes had to move around quickly, and maybe without the general comforts, may have given up jobs. And so we'll come across those people from time to time in our lives and perhaps have opportunities. And it might not look like that in this day and age. I'm a big sewer, but it seems like sewing has got to be less of a functional thing than it is just distraction, art form. It's very expensive to sew garments for yourself. But so I used to think of Tabitha like that a lot, but really she was the kind of woman who took what she had, kind of like my grandma was. She raised 12 children on a farm, and she was always busy doing something and not just for her own. So
Tabitha's a wonderful example of seeing a need and feeling a sympathy and empathy for the people, these widows perhaps who had nobody else to help them, and filling the need and putting putting feet to her feelings, that she did what she could, making garments. And in those days, it wasn't like going down to the store and buying 2 yards of cloth and sewing them up. I mean, it was, to make clothes for somebody was a big production. To make the linen or to weave the cotton or the wool or whatever it was very time consuming. And to make these garments was a wonderful gift. It was not some people only had one thing, and so they were expensive. Jill?
I was going to make that point that these things were very labor intensive. You had to have a lot of resources in order to produce a single garment. And people didn't have a closet full of clothes like we do today in our country.
True.
It was a necessity, not
just a joy. Judy?
Yeah, just along those same lines, let's go back to the Shunammite woman. Imagine what it took for her to make food. All right, having to gather it, get it, put it together. Bread was involved. I mean, it was like an all-day affair, really, to make dinner.
Exactly.
So that's really so important. The other thought I had was that I knew of a woman, she's a good friend of mine, still around. And I remember one time, I was a pretty young Christian then, and she crocheted for all the young girls in the congregation little pocketbooks, just little crochet 2 squares together, and a little string for the 3, 4, 5-year-olds, And so, I mean, that was an act of kindness. We're kind of, going over kindness and empathy and everything also. It all kind of goes together in some ways. But I just thought about that. There wasn't a need, but she saw where that would be a nice thing to do. And I think that's kind of a neat thing also, when you can recognize, oh, I bet they would like something like that.
Yeah.
And you're handy enough or whatever, even if you have to go buy something, whatever it is. That's another thought I just had.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
emotional needs are valid needs, though.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Nikki, I
That's
see your wheels turning.
Yes. I know, right? My brain's turning. Well, Jill, yes. There's the other thing about showing compassion. It doesn't always mean that you have to come out of pocket either. Some people may feel, I can't provide, I can't do this because my house isn't big enough, or we're on a budget, things like that. That's understandable. Everyone's household is different. But what can you do? There's something that all of us can do.
right.
I believe it's just a matter of thinking about it and just saying, okay, when that opportunity comes, or I make the opportunity, remember, no excuses.
Right.
So on either end, you're going to be ready for whatever that is. So, and that could be your time. You've got a mama who's got to get to a very important doctor's appointment and she can't carry her 2 kids with her.
Right.
And you're a stay-at-home mom, and maybe your kid is at school, and maybe you can go over to her house and watch her babies for 2 hours or something. I'm saying, something like that. Or you can sit on the phone with a sister while she pours her heart out because of whatever's going on in her life. That's showing compassion. Like, okay, maybe can I come to you? Can we meet for tea? Showing something that makes you move. It's you're taking action. Come over to my house. There's a quiet place that we can talk here. That's where my wheels were going. And Jill said that sometimes it's not about always what you have as far as material. There's plenty of ways that we can show compassion.
One thing I have known to do is a lot of time, whether actually at the church building or at another occasion, is just to take someone's hand and say, let's pray together. And right then, it doesn't have to be a long and involved prayer, but right then to pray for that special need that person has to go to God together. That's such compassion. And when someone does it for you, wow, you just feel that love of a sister for you, and you feel that compassion. And it's just such a wonderful thing, that God is listening to that prayer, and that costs nothing, very little money, very little time even involved. But you really let that person know you're important and what you're feeling is important. Your need is important. And that made me think of that when what you were saying, Nikki.
That's good.
True.
Good. Jill, did I see your hand?
No.
Did you
No, that makes me feel like I've got some work to do.
We all do.
We all do. That's right.
That's for sure.
Well, the Shunammite lady and Lydia were probably people with resources. I think the scripture had said the Shunammite lady, she was a notable, great lady, so she was one of the, but she took that seriously. God says he gives us so that we can share with others. And she took that responsibility on. So did Tabitha, and
that's right.
Kind of passed on the wealth. So all things to think about. So whether you're or not, as far as your resources, we all have one resource.
Amen.
That we can share in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a wonderful lesson tonight, and I just appreciate so much all of you being with us this evening to talk about these examples of compassion. And there's so many more. I know y'all studied and prepared some others to talk about. And, you had so much I know that you wanted to talk about. I would like to share a comment because we just love it when our viewers comment for us. Tamara Houchin Forsyth has written such great ideas, and I love the connection between compassion and hospitality with relationships. And yes, prayer is a form of compassion as well as offering help that may feel like a small thing or not necessarily a financial burden. We do what we can. And Nikki's example was so good. Just sit with the kids for a little bit. Sometimes that's all that's needed. And that's so much more valuable than any money, any gift can be. And like Judy was talking about, just give a gift that isn't a necessity, but that really, especially with the younger ones, they just, I've known kids feel so valued and loved and appreciated when the older Christians really talk to them and spend time with them and have that understanding of the difficulty of life sometimes for young people becoming godly and trying to stay godly in amongst all the things that are going on in children's lives. So thank y'all so much for everything. And appreciate your being with us tonight and with me tonight. That's what a joy. I tell you, I really appreciate it, y'all. Bailed me out again, so I appreciate it so much.
Of course.
Next week, I anticipate that Cindy will be back, and I think she's going to bring a lesson to us about the worthy woman. We talked last week, I think it was, about the advice that King Lemuel's mother gave to him. And we talked about those verses before the passage that we generally speak of, the worthy woman. Cindy's going to continue that chapter for us and talk about that particular subject. So we're looking forward to that. In the meantime, we encourage all of our viewers to watch Answering Religious Error on Tuesdays at noon, Bible Question and Answer on Wednesdays at noon. And of course, Cindy's husband, Mark, does a podcast, the Daily Answer podcast, Monday through Friday. And Nikki, how's your podcast going along?
It was going. It actually still is going. And I have new episodes dropping next week.
Wonderful. And Benjamin, your husband, he's
still on it?
Isn't he? Yeah. There are so many. We did a program, last year we did a program about the podcast and video blogs and so forth that are available. There is so much that Christians are presenting to the world and to other Christians, both to teach non-Christians the truth as well as to encourage and edify one another. And we just encourage all of you to take advantage of all of those things that are available for us. And ladies, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's such a pleasure always to see Nikki. We don't get to see you very often, and it's just a pleasure to have you with us. And
Good
Judy,
meeting you.
Thank y'all so much again for being with us. So
thank you.
We'll say good night.
Thank you. Good night.